Like so many good things, this story starts with tacos. On March 24th, 2011, exactly 7 years ago today, I invited a group of women to meet me for dinner at one of my favorite Mexican restaurants. Now, most of these women I'd never met before. They didn't know me, and they didn't know one another. But we all had one thing in common. We all loved to write. Some of these women were poets who saw writing as music, the song of the soul. Some were fiction writers, obsessed with creating imaginary worlds. Some were journalists, fighting to give a voice to the voiceless by helping people share their stories. And some were bloggers and essayists, slowly finding the courage to share the stories of their own lives. I'd reached out to these women because I wanted to start a networking group for women who write. Now, whenever I share the story of starting and growing this group, I often recite a grand mission statement about how I wanted to empower women to speak their minds, even if their voices shake. Or, I guess in our case, it would be write your mind, even if your pen shakes. I don't know. But if I'm honest, I started this group for selfish reasons. I wasn't setting out to change lives. I started this group because I was lonely. 2 years earlier, I left my job as a newspaper reporter in Louisville, Kentucky, and moved back to my hometown of Birmingham, Alabama, to teach English. Now, even though I was quite fond of my new colleagues, I miss the group of women writers I have been surrounded by in my newsroom. As one friend put it, I needed a sisterhood of the traveling pens. In 7 years, this group has grown to an international online community of nearly 1,000 women, and a thriving local community of women who are not just my friends, but some of them feel like family. But beyond the relationships, this group is also my form of activism as a feminist. Yes, I said the F word. Feminist. But I hope in 2018 we know that being a feminist doesn't mean I hate men or marriage or motherhood or makeup. In fact, according to the dictionary, and by the way, in 2017, feminism was actually the Merriam-Webster word of the year. And according to the dictionary, a feminist is someone who believes in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes. But is that it? Is that really all it means? Gloria Steinem, who was a face of the American feminist movement of the late 1960s, early 1970s, was once asked in an interview how she would define feminist. And she agreed with Webster. She agreed that a feminist is someone who believes in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes. But she went on to say, I would just add, and doing something about it. Well, her words hit me like a taco truck. Was I doing something about it? Sure, I vote whenever there's an election in my town. I help raise money for organizations that support women and children. And last year, I participated in the Women's March. But I've never started a petition in support of Planned Parenthood. I didn't do anything special to help with the passing of the Lilly Ledbetter Act, although I did fangirl out when I met her in 2016. But I don't even get into intense political debates with my friends on social media. I just write. But when I wrote a personal essay for a local magazine about being a feminist wife, Several young women who were recently engaged to be married emailed me, thanking me for showing them that they could love their husbands without losing themselves. And when I write profiles of women who are doing amazing things in their communities, people read these stories and they get inspired to support these projects, or sometimes they get inspired to start projects of their own. And every time I host an event for my women's writing group, at least one attendee tells me afterward that my words have somehow pushed her to go after dreams she'd been putting off for years. This is why I believe writing can be a feminist act. By sharing her story, a woman can not only fight for equality, but discover why she deserves it in the first place. Through writing, a woman can learn to love herself. And in a world that is constantly telling women we are not enough, self-love is a revolutionary act. I'm speaking from experience. I learned to love my sometimes unruly curls by writing about African American women and the natural hair movement. I learned to love my dark brown skin by writing about colorism. And by seeing my byline, my name, in national magazines and newspapers, I learned to love that name. A name that, growing up, I was told would be a liability because it sounds too black. But is this enough? Am I just practicing lifestyle feminism? That's a term that's been going around the internet lately. It's sometimes called cultural feminism or pop culture feminism, and most of the people writing about it are not doing so to praise it. Jessica Crispin says that contemporary feminism has become weak and too safe. She writes that for too long, feminism has moved away from being about collective action and imagination and toward being a lifestyle. And she says lifestyles do not change the world. But I have to believe that changing a life can. So I'm a writer. So I'm a teacher. And so one day I started thinking, what if I and the women of my writing group had found confidence through writing when we were girls? How would our lives be different today? How would the world be different? That's when I decided I needed to bring this idea of empowering oneself through writing into my classroom. I needed to show my students, especially the girls, that writing can be a feminist act. I wanted to show them that through writing, they could fight for equality and discover why they deserve it. I wanted to teach them that through writing, they could learn to love themselves, in spite of all the messages telling them that something or everything about them needs to be fixed. So in 2013, I started an elective at my school called Women in the Media. This class is sort of part Journalism 101, part Women's Studies, and it teaches students, both boys and girls, how to write for the media, but also how to examine representations of women in the media. And it's working. One student wrote an award-winning essay about the need for our justice system to hold male celebrities accountable for domestic abuse. Another student published an opinion piece in a local newspaper about the need for more realistic and complex Hispanic characters in television and film. And another student, a student with skin like mine, a student who also grew up being told she was pretty for a dark-skinned girl, started a blog celebrating Black beauty, a blog that helps her learn to love the skin she's in, and a blog that she hopes will help other girls do the same. We feminists fight for equality because we want women and girls to live their best lives. And I believe that by sharing your story and helping other people share theirs, that is often the first step to a better life and can be a gateway to activism. Whether you are writing a blog post, an article, an essay, a book, or even the script to a podcast or a YouTube video. And men, listen up. You are not off the hook. You play a role in this too. Husbands, encourage your wives to write that book. Brothers, encourage your sisters to start that blog. And fathers, teach your daughters that they can and should be the authors of their own lives. And don't neglect sharing your stories either, especially those stories that teach your sons that boys do cry and that's okay. Because some gender stereotypes can be just as harmful to our boys as they are to our girls. I believe that every girl, every woman, every person has a story worth sharing. And I believe that my story, your story, our stories have the power to change lives. And it is my hope that by changing one life at a time, one story at a time, we, the storytellers, can change the world. Thank you.